I got back from a 3-day trip to visit my mom, walked into my backyard, and stopped cold. My dock was gone. Just gone. In its place, a pile of busted planks, waterlogged rope, and a shiny new HOA sign staked in the mud like they were proud of it. That dock's been there longer than anything else on my property. My dad built it with his own hands when I was a kid. No contractors, no shortcuts. Just him, a thermos of bad coffee, and a stubborn streak a mile wide. He used to call it his quiet edge. That's where he fished, where he taught me to tie knots, where half the neighborhood kids used to dangle their feet in the river every summer. After he passed, I kept it up the way he would have wanted. Replaced the beams when they started to rot, sanded the deck every spring. Hell, I even kept his old chair bolted to the far end, even though no one sits in it. Wasn't fancy, but it was ours. The kind of place you don't mess with. Thing is, I always figured the HOA didn't care about it. I mean, it was technically within my property lines. My deed shows it, plain as day. And nobody complained. If anything, the neighbors loved it. Sometimes folks would stroll over with beers or bring their kids to fish off the edge. Nobody ever asked permission because they didn't have to. That dock belonged to all of us in a weird, unspoken way. But then Karen got elected head of the HOA, and everything started to feel monitored, like every blade of grass was suddenly up for review. The first time Karen poked her nose in, it didn't even seem like a big deal. I got a letter in my mailbox, not mailed, just stuck in there, like some passive-aggressive love note. It said my dock may not be compliant with current shoreline aesthetics and asked me to submit a request for review if I intended to maintain or modify the structure. That was the phrase, shoreline aesthetics, like it was a fashion show and my dock showed up in sweatpants. I figured it was a mix-up. I mean, the dock had been there since before the HOA even existed, so I wrote back, polite, short, just said it was part of the original property, always maintained, and wasn't going anywhere. Didn't think much of it after that. A week later, Karen showed up at the edge of my lawn during one of her neighborhood walks, clipboard in hand, fake smile, trying to look casual. She made small talk, asked about my dog, complimented the flower beds, then gestured toward the river and said, "You know, we've been talking about modernizing that whole area, clean lines, better flow, that sort of thing." I said, "You mean tearing down everything that makes it worth walking out there?" She laughed like it was a joke, but her eyes didn't. A few weeks after that little chat, I started getting letters. Real ones this time, certified mail. HOA letterhead, Karen's name at the bottom, tone getting colder each time. The first said the dock poses potential liability concerns for the association. The next one claimed it was obstructing future public access to shared natural resources. And the last one? That one said it needed to be removed in anticipation of Phase 1 of shoreline development. That's when I realized this wasn't some passing suggestion. They were building a case, or pretending they had one. I tried to talk to her, walked up to her during one of the HOA meetings and said straight up, "You know that dock's mine, right? Like deed and survey mine." She didn't blink, just said, "We're all part of a shared community experience now. Individual structures can't override collective vision." Then she moved on to talk to someone about mailbox heights. A couple days later, I noticed a guy I didn't recognize out near my property line, taking photos with a long lens. When I walked out to ask what he was doing, he jumped back into his car and drove off. Karen later claimed he was a consultant hired to assess the shoreline for safety and environmental compliance, whatever that means. Then came the vote, or what they called a vote. I wasn't invited, but they held a meeting, declared my dock non-conforming, and added it to some development proposal that none of us had ever seen. A neighbor tipped me off, said Karen called it dead weight during the session, said she smirked. So yeah, I knew where this was going, I just didn't know how far she'd actually take it. First thing I did was dig out my deed, the original one with the survey lines and everything. Clear as day, the property line ran right into the water, just like my dad always said. The dock was well within it. I made copies and dropped them off at the HOA office with a little note that said, "For your records." Didn't hear back, no acknowledgement, not even a passive-aggressive email. Just silence. So I tried the city, filed a zoning confirmation request, got a friendly enough clerk who pulled up the records and told me, yep, my property includes the shoreline, and no, the HOA doesn't have jurisdiction unless the structure crosses into navigable waters or public easement, which it doesn't. She even sent me a copy of the GIS map with a cheerful "good luck" scribbled at the bottom. I forwarded all that to the HOA email, still nothing. Then I went to the next HOA meeting in person, sat right in the front row. Karen didn't even look at me. When I finally spoke up during the open forum and started laying out the paperwork, she cut me off halfway through and said, "Sir, this portion of the meeting is for general feedback, not personal grievances." I remember just sitting there, holding the deed in one hand and the city letter in the other, while everyone looked everywhere but at me. Nobody said a word. A few looked uncomfortable. Most just stayed quiet. Afterward, Karen caught me in the parking lot and said, real calm, "You're welcome to submit a formal appeal through the appropriate channel." I said, "What channel would that be?" She smiled. "Whichever one you think will work." I don't know what pissed me off more, how smug she was or how certain she seemed that I couldn't stop her. I was going through one of my dad's old filing boxes looking for a contractor receipt, just something that showed we'd maintained the dock over the years. Figured it might help if things got more legal. I wasn't expecting anything big, mostly faded utility bills and warranty slips from appliances we don't even own anymore. But then I found this yellowed envelope buried under some tax documents labeled Riparian Use, 1998. I opened it and there it was. A letter from the County Water Commission addressed to my dad, officially acknowledging that the dock was built prior to the creation of the HOA and confirming it was compliant with the Shoreline regulations at the time. It even had a note saying, "Structure is grandfathered in for private recreational use, no commercial activity permitted." Stamped, signed, and certified. My dad must have filed it away just in case something like this ever came up. He was like that, quietly prepared. I scanned it, sent it to Marisol, the lawyer friend I'd been quietly consulting on the side, and she called me the same night. Her first words were, "Do not show this to the HOA yet. We're going to use this the right way." Then she tells me something else. She did a little digging on her own, went back through public records. Turns out the HOA never included this easement exemption in their development plan filing. They submitted a map of unencumbered shoreline, which conveniently left my dock off completely, which means either Karen didn't know it existed, or she knew, and decided to bury it. Either way, it's not just a power grab anymore. It's fraudulent omission. After that call with Marisol, things finally clicked into place for me. I wasn't just some stubborn homeowner clinging to a pile of old wood. I had proof. I had paper. I had the kind of thing that made bureaucrats sweat. So we got to work. She drafted a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA, citing unlawful removal of private property and failure to disclose a grandfathered easement during the planning process. It wasn't aggressive, just very, very clear. She attached copies of the letter from the Water Commission, the county stamp, the map, and the current deed. Everything tied together. Then, while she prepped the legal side, I started talking to my neighbors. The ones who used the dock, the ones who remembered my dad, the ones who'd quietly told me they thought Karen had gone too far. I didn't need a riot. I just wanted them to know the truth. That what happened wasn't just some boring zoning issue. It was someone deciding their memories didn't matter. One of them, Henry, retired guy down the street, used to fish off that dock with my dad, told me he still had photos. Old prints from a neighborhood BBQ back in the day. You could see the dock, clear as day, with kids running around and coolers stacked at the edge. He handed them to me and said, "Let me know if you need someone to speak." We started building a folder, testimonies, maps, statements. Marisol said the goal wasn't just to win a court order, it was to force public accountability. Not a backroom deal, not a quiet fix. We were going to make this thing loud. First strike was the cease and desist. Marisol filed it with the HOA board and CC'd the city zoning department, just so everyone knew this wasn't going to be swept under a rug. We gave them a deadline to respond. Karen didn't. Instead, she tried to spin it, sent out one of those community update emails saying the removal of an unsafe and unpermitted structure had been conducted in alignment with long-term beautification goals. That's when I dropped the hammer. We filed the lawsuit, unlawful destruction of private property, violation of due process, fraudulent misrepresentation in municipal filings, all backed up by certified documents and that old letter from the county. We requested a court injunction to block any future shoreline development until the case was resolved. And then, just to make sure this didn't stay some quiet legal matter, I sent Henry's BBQ photos to the local paper. Not anonymously. Full name, full quote. My father built that dock for the neighborhood. They tore it down like it was garbage. The article went live 2 days later. Headline: HOA bulldozes legacy dock without owner's permission. Karen's face wasn't in the story, but her name was. Neighbors started calling. Some furious, some embarrassed. A few of them, folks I didn't even talk to that much, came by just to say they were sorry for not speaking up sooner. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. This time, I showed up early and sat dead center, brought copies of the lawsuit. When she tried to open with her usual cheerful nonsense, I stood up and asked if she'd like me to read the court filing out loud, or if she preferred everyone take a copy home for bedtime reading. She didn't respond, but her face turned the color of an undercooked salmon. The public hearing was packed. I mean standing room only, people fanning themselves with printouts of the newspaper article, whispering across rows like it was some kind of courtroom drama. Even the city council rep showed up, which apparently never happens unless someone threatens to sue the county. Karen sat at the end of the HOA table, all business casual confidence and tight smiles, but you could see it cracking. Especially when Marisol stood up with that manila folder, started laying out the timeline, when the dock was built, when the HOA was formed, when they forgot to mention the easement in their Shoreline plan. Then came the photos. Henry stood up, old Polaroids in hand, voice shaking just enough to make it hit hard. He pointed to one picture of my dad grilling burgers next to the dock, said, "This isn't a liability, this is our history," and they took it without asking. Someone behind me clapped. Then someone else. It wasn't a standing ovation or anything dramatic, it was more like people realizing they'd let themselves get steamrolled. Karen tried to respond, tried to talk about vision and community standards and environmental realignment, but at that point it just sounded like corporate filler. No one was listening. People were looking at me. That same week we got the court ruling. The HOA had acted outside its authority. They were ordered to pay damages, cover reconstruction costs, and halt any development until a full review could be done. And Karen? She resigned, sent out a tone-deaf email about spending more time with family and stepping aside for the good of the neighborhood. Funny, not a single person replied to it. They rebuilt the dock in early spring. Same footprint, same weathered wood style, even the same little notch in the railing where my dad used to hang his tackle box. I didn't ask for anything fancy, just wanted it the way it was, familiar. I waited until everyone had cleared out, contractors, Marisol, even Henry who stuck around to supervise and tell stories. Then I grabbed a folding chair, walked out to the end, and just sat there. Water was still cold, still moved the same way. Felt like breathing again after holding it for too long. There's a new sign now, small and bolted to the post closest to the river. I had it made quiet and simple. Private dock, established 1982, maintained with care. Sometimes neighbors still stop by. Kids still drop their lines in the water. But now they ask first, not because they have to, but because they understand what it costs to keep it. And Karen? Last I heard, she moved a few blocks away into a townhouse. No shoreline, no dock, just a view of a parking lot.